The city of Zereth was ancient. Its towers were made of black stone that seemed to drink in the light. In the center of the main plaza stood something older than the city itself, a massive sword buried deep in a jagged black rock. The blade shimmered faintly, even in the dim gray skies. No one knew exactly who had forged it. The alien elder said it was created by the first ones, a race that had vanished thousands of years ago. The legend said only a true champion, chosen by the sword, could pull it free. Many had tried, mighty alien warriors with muscles like steel, champions who had lifted mountains in battle. Even giant machines had been brought to try and break the rock. But none had moved the sword even a single inch. That was why Princess Serenia stood in the plaza that day, her arms crossed, her silver hair flowing like a river of light. She loved watching challengers fail. To her, it was entertainment. A crowd of aliens had gathered, their eyes full of expectation. This time, however, the challenger was not an alien. It was a human. He was tall, with dark eyes and a calm face. His name was Kale. He wore a simple black travel coat, nothing like the shining armor of alien warriors. His hands were bare, showing scars from a life of battles and hard work. Serenia smiled with a mocking edge. So, a human thinks he can do what my people could not. This will be amusing, she said loudly, so the crowd could hear. Laughter rippled through the aliens. Some whispered insults. Others shook their heads. Kale did not answer. He only walked toward the sword, each step slow and steady. The sound of his boots echoed in the plaza. The rock was cold under his hand as he touched it. The sword's hilt was black metal wrapped in strange silver lines. As his fingers closed around it, faint warmth moved through the metal and into his skin. No one noticed, at first, that the runes on the blade were beginning to glow. "You should be careful, human," Serenia called out, smirking. "We wouldn't." "Want you to hurt yourself trying?" Kale still said nothing. He set his feet firmly on the ground, tightened his grip, and pulled. The sword didn't move. The crowd roared with laughter. Serenia chuckled and turned away, expecting him to give up, but Kale didn't let go. He adjusted his stance and pulled again, harder this time. A sharp, cracking sound echoed. It was small, almost too quiet to hear, but Kale heard it. His eyes narrowed. The runes along the blade brightened, pulsing like a heartbeat. Some of the laughter in the crowd faded. A few aliens leaned forward. Curious Serenia turned back, her smile weakening. "Impossible," she whispered under her breath. Kale's muscles tensed. She could feel the sword responding to him, almost guiding his hands. The warmth had become a steady heat, and the rock seemed to resist less and less. The air in the plaza changed. It felt heavier, charged with energy. The wind swirled dust around his boots. Serenia's eyes narrowed as she took a step forward. "Stop this," she said sharply, though her voice carried an edge of uncertainty. Kale ignored her. He kept pulling, slow and steady. The cracks in the rock spread wider, glowing faintly from within. The crowd had gone silent now. Only the sound of the stone breaking filled the air. Serenia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Doubt. She had mocked this man, certain he would fail. But the way he moved, the focus in his eyes. It was different from every challenger before him. The sword's glow grew brighter. And the rock groaned under the strain. Kale's breath was steady. His eyes never left the blade. And in that moment, everyone watching felt it. Something was about to happen. The first small chunk of stone fell away, hitting the ground with a dull thud. The sound echoed like a drumbeat across the silent plaza. Serenia's mocking smile was gone. She stood frozen, watching the human with a mix of disbelief and fear, and Kale, still gripping the glowing sword, pulled again. The legend was waking up. The plaza of Zereth was now silent. except for the faint cracking of stone. Kale's hands tightened around the sword's hilt. His shoulders were tense, but his movements were calm. He was not struggling like other challengers had. It was as if he knew exactly how much force to use. The alien crowd watched with wide eyes. Even those who had been laughing moments before now leaned forward. Their voices hushed. A few began whispering to one another, their words carried away by the wind. Princess Serenia's smirk had completely faded. She had seen this ritual hundreds of times. Every challenger, alien, beast, or machine would try to pull the blade, fail within moments, and walk away in shame. But the human was different. The runes carved along the blade now pulsed with a golden light that reflected in Kale's eyes. The light seemed to recognize him. "You should stop now, human," Serenia called out. She tried to keep her voice confident, but there was a faint edge of unease. "That sword has killed greater warriors than you." Kale did not reply. He shifted his stance slightly, planting one foot behind him for more leverage. The air around him was strange now, charged alive, as if the plaza itself was watching. He pulled again. The cracks in the black rock grew wider. Pieces of it began to chip away, falling to the ground. Each fragment that hit the stone plaza made a sharp, ringing sound that echoed into the quiet. Serenia stepped closer, her boots clicking against the ancient floor. "Tell me your name," she demanded. "Kale," he said, without looking at her. Her eyes narrowed. "Kale, why do you want the sword?" His voice was calm, but there was weight behind his words. "Because it's waiting for me." A few aliens in the crowd gasped softly. To them, such confidence was either foolish or dangerous. One of Serenia's guards, a tall alien with skin like black marble, stepped forward. "Princess, should I stop him?" Serenia hesitated. She wanted to say yes, but something deep inside told her that touching him now would be a mistake. "No," she finally said. "Let him try. He will fail, like the rest." But even as she spoke, she was not sure if she believed her own words. Kale pulled again. This time, the sword moved only a fraction of an inch, but enough for the entire plaza to see. The golden light around it flared, casting bright reflections on the walls and the faces of the crowd. A murmur spread through the aliens like a wave. "That's impossible," one whispered. "No one has ever moved it," said another. "Is he chosen?" The sword seemed to hum now, a low, vibrating sound that made the air feel heavier. Kale's breathing deepened, but his eyes never left the glowing blade. Serenia crossed her arms, but her heart was beating faster. She had mocked this man minutes ago, but now she could not look away. There was a strange pull in the air, as if the moment itself was holding her in place. "Why don't you quit while you still have your life?" she asked again, trying to sound in control. Kale spoke without lifting his head. "Some things you don't walk away from." He pulled once more, the stone cracking further. The sound was sharp, almost like breaking ice. The ground beneath. The sword began to tremble lightly, as if some ancient force was stirring. The crowd was no longer mocking him. They were holding their breath. One alien elder, an old being with translucent skin, leaned on his staff and whispered, "The sword is choosing." Serenia heard him and frowned. "The sword chooses no one," she said sharply, but her voice lacked certainty. Kale adjusted his grip again, feeling the heat from the runes travel through his arms and into his chest. It was as if the sword was alive, speaking in a language no one else could hear. The golden glow brightened until it was almost blinding. Dust rose from the cracks in the rock, swirling in the air around him like tiny stars. Some of the aliens stepped back now, their eyes wide, their bodies tense. This was no longer just a man trying to pull a sword. Something greater was happening. throat felt dry. She could not explain why, but her instincts screamed that if Kale succeeded, nothing in her world would ever be the same again. Human, she said quietly, almost to herself. What are you? Kale didn't answer. Instead, he closed his eyes for a brief moment, inhaled deeply, and then with steady force, pulled again. The sword slid another inch free. The hum became a low, resonating tone that seemed to vibrate in every bone of the onlookers. The crowd's unease was now mixed with awe. Kale opened his eyes, and for the first time, he looked directly at Serenia. There was no arrogance in his gaze, only certainty. And in that moment, the princess realized something she would never admit. Out loud, she was no longer watching a human fail. She was watching history change. The golden light from the sword spilled across the plaza, painting every alien face in a warm, almost holy glow. But this was not a warm moment. The air was tense, heavy, and charged with something ancient. Kale's grip was unshakable. His eyes were locked on the blade as if nothing else in the world mattered. His steady breathing matched the slow, powerful rhythm of his pulls. The cracks in the black stone widened again, releasing thin streams of glowing dust. The hum of the sword grew louder, no longer a faint vibration, but a deep, living sound that seemed to echo inside the bones of every onlooker. Serenia stood frozen. Her arms were still crossed, but her hands gripped her elbows tightly. She had mocked this human earlier, expecting a quick failure. Yet now, every instinct told her she was witnessing something that should not be possible. The plaza's crowd began shifting uneasily. Those in the front rows stepped back, giving Kale more space as if afraid of being too close when, or if, the sword came free. One alien elder whispered to another, "The sword is waking." Another replied in a shaky voice, "It has slept." For centuries, why now? Serenia heard their words, but did not speak. She could not tear her eyes away from Kale's calm, focused face. "You shouldn't be able to do this," she said at last, her voice softer than before. Kale didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted his stance, the muscles in his arms flexing slightly. The golden runes on the blade flared brighter, and the stone let out a deep, groaning crack that made the ground tremble. The hum of the sword shifted into a sharp, resonating tone. It felt alive. It felt aware. And every alien in the plaza could feel its attention, like the sword itself was looking directly at Kale. Serenia took a slow step forward. Her voice was low, almost cautious now. "Do you even know what you're touching, human?" Kale's eyes flicked toward her for just a second. "Enough to know it doesn't belong to you," he said simply. A ripple went through the crowd. To speak that way to the princess was dangerous, but no one dared shout at him. The golden light from the blade made every alien hesitate. Serenia narrowed her eyes. "That sword was forged by the first ones. My people have guarded it for half a millennium. We've seen what happens when unworthy hands try to claim it. And what happens?" Kale asked, his voice calm. "They die," she said, her words almost a warning. Kale pulled again. The sword slid another inch from the stone. The golden light flared so brightly that some aliens shielded their eyes. Serenia's pulse quickened. The sword was moving more easily now. She could feel something, a strange, ancient energy building in the air. It was like a storm was about to break. The guards near her shifted nervously. One spoke quietly. "Princess, this could be dangerous." "Perhaps we should silence," Serenia snapped, though her voice trembled just slightly. She didn't want to admit it, but she was afraid, not of Kale, but of what would happen if he succeeded. She stepped closer again, now only a few paces away from him. "You think strength is enough to claim it?" she asked, her voice sharp. Kale's reply was firm. "It's not strength. It's will." And with that, he pulled again, a slow, relentless motion. The rock cracked further, large chunks breaking off and crashing to the ground. The hum of the sword deepened, and the golden light began to swirl around Cale in thin streams, almost like it was wrapping him in its power. The crowd was silent now. No laughter, no jeers. Only the sound of stone breaking and the steady, cue-shaken breathing of a human who refused to stop. Saranya's eyes darted from the sword to Cale's face. His expression hadn't changed from the moment he first touched the blade. It wasn't anger, pride, or desperation. It was something far more dangerous: certainty. The princess felt her mouth go dry. She had mocked him at first, but now she wasn't just uneasy. She was afraid of what the sword might do, and what Cale might become once he held it. A final, sharp crack rang out, echoing across the plaza like a drumbeat. The sword was now more than halfway free. Saranya took an involuntary step back. She had never seen it move this far before. The thought struck her like ice. If he pulled it completely free, nothing in their world would remain the same. The golden light flared once more, the air vibrating with power. Cale's eyes never wavered, and deep inside, Saranya knew. The moment of truth was coming. The hum from the sword grew louder. It's vibrating through the ground, the air, and into the bones of everyone present. The golden light now danced like flames along the blade, casting long, moving shadows across the plaza. Cale's hands were steady on the hilt. Sweat traced slow lines down his face, but his breathing remained controlled. He could feel it. The sword was almost his. The resistance in the stone was fading, replaced by a strange, living pull, as though the blade itself wanted to be free. Around him, the alien crowd shifted uneasily. Many had stepped far back, their earlier mockery gone. Their eyes were wide, some with awe, some with fear. Saranya stood close enough now to feel the heat radiating from the glowing runes. Her silver hair swayed in the strange wind that had begun to swirl in the plaza. It wasn't a natural wind. It carried a faint hum, the same pitch as the sword's song. "This is madness," she said sharply, though the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. "If you take it, you will awaken something you cannot control." Cale's gaze didn't leave the sword. If it needed control, it would have chosen someone else. The ground beneath the black rock trembled. Cracks spread outward from its base, reaching toward the plaza's edge like lightning. Dust rose into the air, mixing with the golden glow, making the scene look like it was happening inside a storm of light. One of Saranya's guards stepped forward, his massive frame tense. "Princess, we cannot allow this." "The council will stay where you are," Saranya ordered, her voice firm now. Something inside her told her not to interfere. Not yet. Cale's arms flexed as he pulled again. The sword moved with a smooth, slow resistance, like the last breath of a dying prisoner before freedom. The hum grew louder, turning into a deep, resonating tone that rattled the windows of the surrounding buildings. Then it happened. The sky above Zereth darkened in an instant. Thick, swirling clouds formed directly above the plaza, spinning in a slow, ominous spiral. Golden streaks of lightning flashed inside them, their light syncing with the sword's pulses. The crowd gasped and began backing away further. Some, even, dropped to their knees, muttering ancient prayers. Saranya felt the hair on her arms rise. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to something vast, something older than her people's history. "Human," she called, her voice raised too. "Be heard over the storm. Listen to me. The sword is bound to the laws of the first ones. If you break the seal, you will not just take it, you will take its burden." Cale's expression didn't change. "Maybe that's why I'm here." A fierce gust of wind surged from the sword, forcing Saranya to step back. The guards braced themselves, holding onto their weapons as their cloaks whipped in the air. With a sharp crack, another massive piece of stone broke away, landing heavily beside Cale. The sword was now almost completely free. Only the tip of its blade remained inside the black rock. Serenia's heart pounded. She could feel the power building to a peak, like the moment before a dam bursts. She opened her mouth to warn him again, but the words caught in her throat. The sword began to sing. It was not just a hum now. It was a melody, low and haunting, as if the weapon itself was speaking to every soul in the plaza. The notes carried something ancient, a language without words, and it stirred emotions no one could name. Cale's grip tightened, his jaw clenched, and then, with one slow, deliberate pull, he drew the blade another inch. The storm above roared, sending down a bolt of golden lightning that struck the plaza floor just meters away, exploding into sparks. The aliens cried out, some fleeing toward the edges of the city, but Cale did not flinch. The sword's glow now wrapped around him entirely, aligning his body in golden fire. He looked less like a man and more like a figure from legend. Serenia stared at him, her earlier mockery completely forgotten. In its place was something new, the realization that the human before her might not just be strong. He might be the one the sword had been waiting for all these centuries. Cale took a deep breath, preparing for the final pull. Every heart in the plaza stopped, every voice silent. The air was so thick with power that even breathing felt heavy. Serenia whispered, almost without thinking, "If you do this, there's no turning back." Cale's eyes met hers for a single heartbeat, and then, without a word, he pulled. The plaza seemed to hold its breath. Every alien stood frozen. Even the storm above paused in its swirling, as if waiting for what would happen next. Cale's fingers tightened around the hilt. No. The glow from the runes was so bright now that the details of his face were blurred in golden light. His boots were planted firmly. His arms steady, he pulled. The black stone gave way with a sound like the breaking of mountains. Shards of it burst outward, scattering across the plaza floor in a ring. A flash of golden light erupted from the point where the sword had been locked for centuries, filling the air with a warmth that made the skin tingle. The blade slid free. It rose in Cale's hands, gleaming with an otherworldly brilliance. The hum that had been growing for so long shifted into a single, deep note, a tone that seemed to vibrate through the city itself. The storm above answered. Golden lightning ripped across the clouds, followed by a rumble so deep it made the ground shake. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the storm stopped. The clouds broke apart, and sunlight spilled onto the plaza for the first time in weeks. Silence followed, not a whisper, not a cough. Only the sound of Cale's slow breathing as he looked down at the weapon in his hands. The sword was beautiful. The black hilt was smooth and warm, the silver inlay patterns shifting like flowing water. The blade itself seemed to hold light inside it, glowing faintly even in the sun. Every alien in the plaza stared. Their earlier laughter and scorn were gone, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. Some looked at Cale with fear, others with awe. A few dropped to one knee, bowing their heads without a word. Princess Serenia stood completely still. Her silver hair hung loose in the soft wind that followed the storm. She had mocked him, mocked the very idea of a human even touching the sword. And now she couldn't speak. She stepped forward slowly, her boots crunching over pieces of broken stone. "It's possible," she whispered. No one could. Her voice faded. The look in her eyes was not just shock now. 'Twas something deeper, something that made her uneasy respect. Cale lowered the sword slightly, studying the way the light danced along its edge. "It's lighter than I thought," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You should not have been able to lift it," Serenia said, her tone sharper now, as if trying to cover her shaken state. The sword chooses its bearer. And it has. Never chosen anyone in my lifetime. Kale met her gaze. Then maybe it was waiting for the right moment. Her breath caught. She wanted to argue, but the truth of his words settled heavily on her. The crowd began to murmur, voices rising in a mixture of disbelief and excitement. Some called Kale's name, others shouted questions, but no one dared approach him too closely. The golden glow still lingered around his body. It's faint but undeniable. One of Saranya's guards, a tall alien with armor that shimmered in the sunlight, stepped forward cautiously. "Princess, what are your orders?" Saranya didn't answer. Right away, her eyes stayed on Kale, trying to read him. Was he a threat, a savior, or something else entirely? Finally, she spoke. "No one touches him. No one touches the sword." The guard hesitated, then stepped back. Kale turned the blade slightly, feeling its balance. He could sense something inside it, a quiet, watchful presence. It was as though the sword was aware, studying him just as he studied it. The silence in the plaza began to feel heavy again. The moment was too big, too strange for anyone to know how to react. Finally, Saranya broke it. "You have no idea what you've done. Human." Kale's voice was calm. "I know enough." Her jaw tightened. She stepped closer, her voice lowering so only he could hear. "That sword will make you a target for every ruler, warlord, and empire in this sector. Some will try to take it from you. Some will try to kill you before you can use it. And some will follow you." Kale didn't look away. "Then I'll be ready." Saranya studied him for another long moment. There was no fear in his eyes, no arrogance either, only the same steady certainty he had shown from the moment he first touched the sword. She felt a strange twist in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was pride or dread. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of ozone left behind by the lightning. Somewhere in the distance, the city's bells began to ring, a deep, ceremonial tone reserved for historic events. Kale slid the sword to his side, holding it with ease. Around them, the crowd began to cheer, the sound growing louder until it filled the plaza. But Saranya didn't join them. She knew this was only the beginning, and deep inside, she wondered if giving the sword to a human would save her world. Or destroy it. The ringing of the city's bells echoed over Zareth, deep and slow, carrying across the black stone streets. It was a sound that people rarely heard, a sound meant for moments that would be remembered for generations. Kale stood. In the center of the plaza, the sword resting at his side, still glowing faintly. The golden light had dimmed since the storm, but it remained. Like a quiet fire waiting to burn again, the alien crowd was still gathered, though their mood had shifted. Moments ago, they had laughed at him. Now, many watched with reverence, bowing, their heads slightly whenever his eyes passed over them. Others whispered urgently among themselves. Glancing toward the palace in the distance, Princess Saranya had not moved far from him. Her silver eyes stayed fixed on the sword, though her mind was elsewhere. She could already imagine the chaos this would cause. The High Council would not be pleased. Other city-states would hear of this by nightfall. And beyond Zareth's walls, warlords and mercenaries would begin preparing to claim the weapon for themselves. She stepped closer to Kyle, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You have no idea how many enemies you've just made." Kale's reply was calm. "Enemies aren't new to me." Saranya almost smiled at that. But it wasn't a moment for humor. "You don't understand. The sword is more than a weapon. It's a symbol. To my people, whoever holds it has the right to challenge the throne itself." Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that what you think I'm here to do?" Her voice stayed steady, but there was a sharp edge to it. "I think you're dangerous, not because of who you are, but because of what you're holding." Before Kale could answer, a group of armored figures pushed through the crowd. Their armor was a deep violet, trimmed in silver, the color of the royal guard. They moved with precision, forming a half-circle around Serenia and Kale. The captain of the guard, a tall alien with sharp features and a voice like gravel, stepped forward. "Princess, the council demands that the sword be brought to the palace immediately." Serena didn't move. "And if the bearer refuses," the captain's eyes flicked to Kale, then back to her. "Then we take it by force." The tension in the air sharpened instantly. Some in the crowd stepped back, sensing trouble. The guards' hands rested on their weapons. Kale's grip on the sword tightened slightly, but he didn't raise it. "If you think you can take it," he said evenly, "try." The captain's jaw tightened. He looked to Serenia for the order. But she didn't give it. Her mind raced. If she told them to attack, there would be blood in the plaza. The sword's power was unknown if Kale used it. She couldn't predict the outcome. Instead, she said, "The bearer will come to thee palace willingly. The council will speak to him there." Kale's eyes studied her for a moment. "And if I say no, then you'll be hunted," she said plainly. "And not just by these guards, by every power in this sector. You won't make it out of the city." Kale thought about that. His eyes moved over the crowd, seeing the mixture of awe, fear, and curiosity. He knew she wasn't lying. Finally, he gave a small nod. "Fine. I'll hear what they have to say." Relief flickered across Serenia's face, though she tried not to show it. She turned to the captain. "Stand down. We escort him to the palace without harm." The guards shifted uneasily, but obeyed, lowering their hands from their weapons. As the group began moving toward the palace, whispers followed them through the streets. Some called Kale the Chosen, others the Challenger. The people's eyes followed him until he disappeared through the main gates. Inside the palace, the air was cooler, quieter. The corridors were lined with tall black pillars and banners of violet and silver. Kale's footsteps echoed alongside the measured tread of the guards. Serena walked beside him, her voice low. "You should know something. The council will not see you as a hero. To them, you are a disruption, a human holding a weapon that should be theirs." Kale's gaze stayed forward. "Then I won't expect a warm welcome." She hesitated before speaking again. "If you want to survive this, you may need an ally." He glanced at her. "And you're offering?" Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "I'm considering it." They reached the great hall, a vast chamber with a high arched ceiling and a circular table at its center. Around it sat 12 alien figures, each dressed in heavy ceremonial robes. Their eyes turned to Kale the moment he entered. The eldest among them spoke, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Human, you have drawn the sword of the first ones from its stone. This act cannot be undone." Kale stood tall, the sword at his side. "Then we'll see what happens next." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, and Serenia, standing just behind Kale, knew the game had changed forever. The great hall of the Zereth Palace was silent, except for the faint hum of the sword in Kale's hand. The 12 council members sat in a wide circle, their expressions a mixture of fear, suspicion, and cold calculation. Above them, long banners hung from the ceiling, swaying gently in the still air. The eldest counselor, an alien with pale green skin and eyes like polished glass, leaned forward. "Human," he said slowly, "you have done what no one in our history has done. But understand, the sword does not belong to you." Kale met his gaze without flinching. "It came to me. I didn't take it from anyone. If it didn't want me to hold it, I wouldn't be here." A ripple of uneasy murmurs passed around the circle. Some council members avoided looking at the blade, as if its glow was too much to face. One of the younger counselors, a tall figure with crimson markings on her face, slammed her palm onto the table. This is unacceptable. A human, an outsider, holding the most sacred relic of the first ones. This is a threat to the stability of every alliance we've built. Saranya's eyes narrowed at the outburst. She could feel the tension in the room thickening, like the air before a lightning strike. The eldest counselor raised a hand for silence. The sword has been bound to our people for centuries. It was meant to be wielded only by one of us. If it chooses a human, then perhaps it is broken. Kale's voice was steady. Or maybe it was never bound to you in the first place. That sentence cut through the hall like a blade. The counselors shifted in their seats, their unease growing. The crimson-marked counselor's voice rose. We should take it from him now, before word spreads further. If the other city-states learn of this, there will be war. Kale tilted his head slightly. You can try, he said simply. It wasn't a threat spoken with heat or anger. It was the quiet, unshaken tone of someone who knew exactly what he could do. Saranya stepped forward before the argument could spiral further. If you attack him now, you'll prove to the people that the council fears him. They will see him as the rightful bearer even more. That will spark rebellion faster than any warlord could. The eldest counselor's gaze shifted to her. And what do you suggest, princess? Saranya hesitated for a moment. She knew what she was about to say could change everything. Let him keep the sword. For now, watch him. Study him. If he is unworthy, we will know. And if he is, perhaps he is the one the legends speak of. The council chamber filled with low voices again. Some agreed reluctantly. Others looked ready to protest. Finally, the eldest counselor spoke. Very well. But the human does not leave this city without our knowledge, and he will be escorted at all times by one of our own. Kale glanced at Saranya. And that would be you. She gave a small, almost reluctant smile. It seemed so. The meeting ended with no further decisions, but Kale could feel the weight of many eyes following him as he left the hall. The council had not accepted him. They had only delayed the fight. Outside the palace, the sun was setting. The black stone streets glowed orange under the fading light. The city was quieter now, but the news had already spread. As Kale walked beside Saranya, small groups of aliens gathered at a distance to watch him pass. Some bowed. Others turned away with distrust in their eyes. You've made history, Saranya said quietly as they walked. That's not always a good thing. Kale smirked faintly. History isn't supposed to be comfortable. They reached the edge of the plaza where the sword had been. The black rock was gone, shattered into hundreds of pieces. Only the empty space remained, glowing faintly where the blade's power had seeped into the ground. Saranya looked at the space for a long time. I thought the sword was ours. My people's. Now I'm not sure it ever was. Kale looked down at the weapon in his hand. Maybe it belongs to no one. Maybe it just waits for the person it needs. A sudden sound caught both their attention, the distant blast of a war horn from beyond the city walls. Saranya's eyes sharpened instantly. That's not ours. Kale's grip on the sword tightened. Then it didn't take long. She turned to him, her voice firm. If you're going to hold that sword, you're going to have to fight for it, and for this city. Are you ready for that, human? Kale met her gaze. I was ready the moment I touched it. The war horn sounded again, closer this time. In the fading light, the first silhouettes of approaching forces appeared on the horizon. And in that moment, Saranya knew this was no longer just about the sword. It was the beginning of a legend.